You know, I don't think we've done that intro video in a while.
Can we just go back to that?
It's really soothing, right? And I wonder, I'm like, man, why haven't we done this in a while? And then the second it started playing, I was like, I just started laughing because in my head I hear Justin going, "Oh, that's right, it's like a lullaby." It kind of like lulls you to sleep a little bit. If you're watching the video on YouTube, obviously it's got the like little earth going by. It's like, honestly, know what it looks like? It looks like, for the Star Wars fans, and I promise I'm not going to intro with Star Wars like I did with Andy a few weeks ago. But it looks like Yavin 4 going around the bigger Yavin in A New Hope. Like, I don't know, the red giant behind us. If you're watching the YouTube, you know that Justin is not with us today. We do have a guest. Chase Bunker is here. You've heard him on the podcast many a times. Reporter at WOKV in Jacksonville, of course, the place that is near and dear to Justin and I's heart. You also hear him on the Bunker's Burning Hot Take podcast. I've been on there a bunch of times. Chase has been on this show a bunch of times. And it's kind of ironic that Justin is on vacation after Joel Embiid signs a max extension, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. We're not going to start there. We are going to start with the Woj bomb that he is leaving ESPN and retiring. He's bombed his own retirement. Though I guess technically it's not a full retirement. He's going back to work in the athletics department. It's St. Bonaventures, which is a school that he went to. And so, you know, it's really a homecoming type deal for him. Bonnie's athletic director actually went on ESPN the other day and was basically like, look, he took a huge pay cut. Like, this is a passion project type deal for Woj. And good for him. That's basically the way I look at it, is like, listen, go chase your passion project. Lord knows that dude has put in plenty of hours in the NBA trenches. And it's crazy. Somebody said it the best, where it was like, Chase, I was cracking up, and it was, you know, the fact that he's going to now in the NIL and going to GM a college basketball team is like less stressful to him than NBA news breaking. Like, that's really saying something.
It really is. Like, it's one of those situations where you have to kind of ask yourself, Dan Patrick brought this up, and I think it's a really fun game. Like, what is the job that you're willing to take like this significant of a pay cut to go do, like, for your dream job? Like, granted, for me, I work in radio, so it's technically a pay raise, but like, regardless, it's like to go from $7 million that this guy was making, because he was like the premier NBA insider, to go into like $100,000. Like, it's such a significant gap. But the thing is, like, I don't blame him for the move, because like, it was the fact that Adam Schefter said it best. Like, this is a guy who was glued to his phone in a business where, like, luckily for me, I'm not in the business of being first. I'm in the business of being right. He's in the business of being first and right. Like, he has a rival in Shams, so he has to get it out first. And when you are somebody who is constantly on your phone, like he was on his phone during his wedding, or during a wedding, not his wedding. That probably wouldn't be good. But like, it's like, how many times have we seen him on ESPN shows? He's on his phone because he's getting news. Like, he was like the premier insider. And the thing is, he said it, time is very limited. And I think he just kind of realized, look, I can't be doing this long. I can't be on my phone in the shower or during events just so I don't miss a text on what's happening. And I salute him for it, like, because that's a lot of money to turn down. But it also makes me feel a little bit better, because normally when you go into news, like, your next job is communications. So now I technically could be like a GM of some college athletic team. So
Hey, listen.
Hey, UNF, if you want me, sure. UCF, you want me, sure.
Go Ospreys. You charge on too, but you might have to work your way up to UCF a little bit. I don't know if you're quite that level yet, but I do have faith in you, Chase. Complete faith.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you're right. It's nonstop when you're in that job. And like, we know the NBA goes through up and down periods. And I mean, really, the last few weeks have been as slow as it's ever going to get in the NBA. But still, like, when the season gets going, when, you know, trade deadline comes around and free agency begins, like, you are quite literally working almost round the clock 24/7, because that's just the world that you've decided to live in. Like, I do think, like, Bill Simmons had a funny point earlier where it's like, that Schefter quote was something where it's like, you know, he's talking about, you're right, like reading the phone in the shower and doing all that is true. But there is something to be said about like, hey, it's still sports media. Like he's not in the hospital, like saving COVID patients in the middle of the pandemic. Like I did laugh. Bill Simmons still makes me laugh once in a while, and he did get me with that one. But I don't want to downplay the job either. Like it's just nonstop. Like that's you have made that your life to get to that level and get to that job. And like, look, Woj is 55 years old at this point. Like he's not quite retirement age per se. But he's getting to that point, it starts to take a toll on your health. Again, the lack of sleep, the weird hours, the constant screen time. Yeah, I'm sure that's having an effect on your relationships a little bit. Like I can't speak to Woj's personal life, but I can imagine like your friends and family have to recognize that you are just on your phone 24/7 because it's constant networking. Like that's how you get this information. It's just getting to know people, getting them to like you, and then just working from there. But it is like I want to see somebody pitch this idea on Twitter. I forget who it was. I wish I could give them credit, but it's like I would love to see Woj write a book of like all the almost trades or like all the scenarios that actually got talked about that he didn't actually publish, but where it was like, hey, this was actually this close to really happening, or like, insert rumor here was actually completely made up, and whoever said that like had no credible sources at all. Like I would love to hear kind of a tell-all book eventually from Woj, because he is. I mean, Shams is the guy now, and there's going to be somebody who replaces Woj. Like there's already a few names that are popping up, but when you talk about premier newsbreakers, especially in the era of Twitter, he's definitely the guy. Like the Woj bomb is a thing for a reason.
Exactly. And especially during like trade deadline or the first day of free agency, like you pretty much like you turn notifications on because you just want to see what he has to say, because he's going to be usually the first person to break it. It's either be him or Shams, which is always just a fun race. And he was the premier guy. And so right now, I've heard some people say that Brian Windhorst is going to be the guy. The best line I heard is we're going to go from Woj Shams to Windbreakers. So that could be something. I've heard. I don't think this one's actually going to happen, but I've heard like Jake Fisher's name rolled around in there. But it's when you're in the information game, there is a thrill to it, but eventually, yeah, it just takes its toll. And I think he just saw it as, all right, I think this is it. Like I've got money. Like I'm guessing he's not a big spender. So he's like, yeah, I could just write on this for however long, just because, yeah, that's 7 million a year. Good amount of money.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into all that, but like you hope that you're right. You hope that's taken care of. And again, it's not like he's going to be struggling at this Bonaventure gig either. I don't know. We'll see who takes I'm a Windy guy. I do like Brian Windhorst a lot. I kind of hope he's there. Chris Haynes as well as a guy who I think is going to continue to break news. He's been now for a little bit. I mean, Shams is looking at this and going, hey, you talk about that 7 million. He's like, blank check, baby. Like ESPN, are you coming to get your Woj replacement? Like you got to put a little bit of pressure now on Yahoo and all these other networks to kind of keep the money up and keep him there.
And his stadium deal just expired as well. And you see him a lot on McAfee, which I know Woj hated in the beginning. I'm sure he still hated because it's like, hey, I'm the ESPN guy. Why aren't you just taking me? But I think that there probably is a good chance. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing Shams in an ESPN role.
I mean, it's a rivalry there too between Woj and Shams too, but like I think there's also that reality where it's like, look, I mean, Shams became a thing because of Woj. Like there was a lot of mentorship there. Like I know they ended up becoming rivals here a little bit, but I think we'll see them together probably at some point, which will be pretty cool. Yeah, and I mean, look, like there's some of the it is a little bit of a dirty business too, news breaking. Like there's a lot of, if you're not giving me info, maybe I won't talk about your team as highly. Like I'm not going to just ignore that element of it all. But again, when you just look at the culture of NBA news breaking and, Justin and I talk all the time about how the league has really gone 24/7 and just become this year round event. That's a big part of it. I love the Twitter or whoever tweeted, turning your Woj notifications off is like that scene at the end of The Dark Knight when they break the bat lamp or the bat light, and just like, it was classic. It's going to be weird. Not looking out for those tweets, but, and I mean, I guess we already got a taste of it today, right? With the Joel Embiid signing, which we'll get into in a little bit, but like, that was the first one where it's like, hey, there's no Woj text coming here. Like, we're moving on. The retirement is official. So end of an era. There's no doubt about that.
End of an era. Exactly.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rafuse. Again, Justin is out this week. Full housekeeping notice. Justin also may not be here next episode either. We're still 50-50 on that. He's just kind of busy. There's like a lot of things going on right now. But so if he's not here for 2 weeks in a row, don't think he's on like some indefinite hiatus. He'll be back after that. But of course, Chase Bunker, again, follow him on Twitter at Chase Bunker, WOKV, Bunker's Burning Hot Take. You know the drill now at this point. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. I'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music, Player FM, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. Watch the show on YouTube. Just search Drive and Dish NBA podcast, and you will see the video version of all of our episodes there. And now a word from our sponsors. All right, so just what Chase always envisioned talking about with a diehard Sixers fan, just being flooded with a main Philly segment when he agreed to come on this podcast. I swear this wasn't a setup. It wasn't an ambush. But that is the way it just has to go tonight. Joel Embiid agreeing to a 3-year, $192.9 million contract extension with the Sixers. This has him locked in now for the next 5 years. Notably on Instagram, Embiid said that he wants to finish his career in Philly, that this was about, locking things up, getting things, taken care of. And really, I mean, there's a few things I think, and I'll get into all the Homer stuff in a little bit, but the thing that strikes me with the timing, besides the fact that Maxey and Paul George are now on the same timeline as well, is like, look, if you're Joel, you want to cash this in now because he is getting closer to 30 at this point. I think it goes without saying that Embiid's dealt with a ton of injuries. Like, I talk all the time about players that'll age well, and I think in playing until 40. I don't think Joel's playing until he's 40. Like, I think he's probably got, 3-4 more years, hopefully, of this MVP caliber level basketball. And so you got to cash in on that now. Like, get your money here. If you're happy with the situation, go for it. Like, it's a no-brainer for the franchise to want to bring it back. And I think this is an example of saying, hey, maybe betting on yourself is not the best scenario in this situation.
Yeah, it's good to see Embiid stay with the team because there were parts that I was worried about him possibly going to the Heat with Jimmy Butler, just like almost like that exhaustive, okay, this team can't win, I'm going to go elsewhere. And I think the emergence of Tyrese Maxey while he was away kind of helps solidify, okay, we actually could have something here. Then you throw in Paul George, like, okay, yeah, they're at least like making an effort here. So it's good that he's going to stay because, yeah, I think you're right. He's definitely not going to be a guy that's going to be playing until he's 40. Eventually, those injuries pile up. They get worse as you get older. And so I see him being at like 32 and just going, I can't deal with this anymore. 34 max, like if he's got a higher pain threshold than I do. But it's one of those where I'm glad to see him resign. I like that in this age of the NBA, where we've seen people go to super teams and all that, like there is still some team loyalty, and the fact that he's been with the Sixers for this long, and now he's going to stay there for at least 3 more years and not trying to push his way out and is willing to buy into the team still, I think it's a nice, refreshing thing to see.
Yeah, and I mean, look, like it's been stressful, and there are moments where, I mean, not just with Miami, I think with the New York rumors definitely had some smoke at some point. Like the Sixers, and rightfully, like if Joel had asked out, I wouldn't have necessarily been mad. I'd have been upset about it just because he's one of the better players that this franchise has ever had. Like I know what would happen if he were to leave this franchise, but would it be hard to blame him? Like the way the Markelle Fultz situation played out, the way Ben Simmons played out, the way the Harden breakup publicly ended, like the fact that Jimmy Butler walked out the door, the Al Horford and Tobias Harris signings just being horrendous failures for this franchise. Like Embiid had all the reason in the world. That doesn't even get talk about the fact that Brian Colangelo was trash talking him on burner accounts. Like, we're not even, there are so many reasons that this franchise, or ways, I guess, that this franchise has let Joel down. But I think you nailed the one big point that I've been talking about for a while. Tyrese Maxey saved this franchise. Like, the emergence of Tyrese Maxey just as a bona fide, lovable superstar who the city has rallied around. And Joel has said, like, he's his favorite teammate, like, ever. When Maxey resigned, he was at the ceremony, like, said, this is, I want you to stay here. And I think this offseason in particular, too, probably has provided more stability than Joel has seen in a while. And that's pretty crazy when you're bringing in Paul George, and like, there are some new faces here, but this is the first time that there's not just like discord and people that don't want to be in the organization. Like, everybody they went out and signed, the Caleb Martins of the world, the Andre Drummonds, like bringing Kyle Lowry back, like all these guys are bought into the mission. And
Dirty
I think
player.
that's, yeah. And basketball terrorist, as some podcasts would say, from a few years ago. Would never be me. I would have never ever said those things.
No, it wouldn't be you.
I mean, if Nick Batum had come back, and I feel like a broken record with that, but it's like, it would have been the perfect offseason if Nick Batum had come back. And look, I get it. His wife wants to live in LA. Listen, go back to the Clippers. He's earned that. He's at the end of his career. I get that. But yeah, they're one piece away in my eyes in terms of like really, really contending. And yeah, to put those whispers to bed. And I think for Joel too, and just from the Homer perspective in Philadelphia, it's like, yeah, if Joel retires here and is a one franchise player, like, he's already on track to have 21 retired in the rafters of the Wells Fargo Center or wherever they're going to be playing. We'll get into that in a little bit. That is a whole mess right now as well. But yeah, he's going to break all sorts of records. Like, in a franchise that's had a fair amount of great players over the time, like, Joel has the potential to be one of the greatest. And you're right, like, in an era where it just doesn't really happen anymore. I mean, after Kobe and after Dirk and like Tim Duncan, they were like the last few guys recently who are doing that. Maybe there's a few guys now that'll be on track to do that, but that is a special scenario. And I think it's something that we shouldn't take for granted, because you're right. Like, there were major portions of this point that I thought he might have been out the door. And oh, by the way, we're not even talking about the fact that the first 2 years of rooting for Joel Embiid, he was a concept. We didn't even see him on the basketball court.
Yeah. Like, here's the funny thing. I remember when he got drafted, because there was rumors that Orlando was going to take him, because it's just like, well, it's the part of the tanking process. He's still hurt. And so we'll just, it was be somebody else. Like, Philly was going to take somebody else at that time. And I think actually there was rumored that they were going to take Dante Exum. And so they're like, oh, wow, they took Joel Embiid. And I was thinking, as a Magic fan, great, we got Dante Exum. And then no, we got Aaron Gordon. And I was
better
just
pick,
depressed.
Loki. I mean,
it was better pick. Like, that was back when I thought that Rob Hennigan was a competent GM, but that's neither here nor there. It's funny to hear you mention all of those slights against the Sixers with, again, the Markelle Fultz, Ben Simmons, how the Tobias deal ended up. You have Jimmy Butler walking out. Like, to be that consistently good in the regular season. Let's not talk about postseason, because postseason, like, that's a whole different beast. But like, to at least still be a top team despite all that, I think it kind of speaks to, like, one, the greatness that is Joel Embiid, and two, like, Sixers fans would probably be like on a suicide watch if it wasn't for that, because that's just so many misses after another. It's like that one time when you were telling me about all the misses at wide receiver that Howie Roseman missed on for the Eagles, missing out on DK Metcalf and taking JJ Ortega-Whiteside, taking Jalen Reagor instead of Justin Jefferson. It's like, you guys are still good somehow, even though those are really bad misses.
I don't know if I want to talk about the Eagles after Monday night. I might need a break from a little bit.
Yeah, you might need a break.
Yeah, lost, but no, and I mean, yeah, the fact that they've been able to, the city's been able to rally around him. I mean, there were a lot of rumors early on. I mean, go back to that draft. Like, Embiid is probably going 1 to Cleveland if he doesn't get hurt. He gets hurt in that workout. He breaks his foot. And the rest is history, essentially. Like, he probably goes 1 to Cleveland at that point. Like, Jabari Parker was locked into 2, it seemed like, but would he have been 2 if, because, the question was it going to be Wiggins or was it going to be Parker? It seemed like Milwaukee was pretty locked into Jabari, but then Wiggins slips to Philly. Again, Wiggins has been a good pro, but like, that's a massive franchise changing difference if Wiggins slips there instead of Embiid. Yeah, it was the best case scenario for his career wise. And now, I think this is now a top 3 when you count the whole 5 years of this contract, a top 3 richest contract in NBA history. So again, like, the ultimate best case scenario for Joel. It just all comes down to the playoffs now. Like, that's simply it. Like, the Sixers have been great. They've got to the second round and they've never got past it. Like, this is the best roster, in my opinion, that they fielded in the Embiid era. It's the most complete roster. And you got to take it to the top. Like, that's the only reason that we're not talking about Joel as like one of the best players of a generation. It is. It's like, that is the very valid sticking point, is that the postseason success, some of it his fault, some of it not his fault. But either way, the combined lack of postseason success just is there. And he has to get over that hump.
By the way, going back to your draft comment, could he have been at 1? I don't, if I memory serves, I don't think he was ever really considered at 1 because like there was a lot of hype going in about Andrew Wiggins and Jabari Parker. And so I think it was like Embiid was always going to be 3, but the fact that he got injured really like slid him down.
He was
But
rising late, dude. He was rising up boards, like,
he
because
was,
he showed out at Kansas. Like, it was him and Wiggins that same year at Kansas. And like, Embiid was the story at the end of the year. It was like, yo, wait, who is this guy?
yeah, like he was definitely like the guy, but it was like, but everybody was like, I just remember even when they came out of high school, while they were still in high school, it was always just going to be
Yeah.
Wiggins and Parker, number 1 and number 2. Like there was no way that they were going to just say no to that. And so there was that's why it was kind of surprising to see Embiid go 3 because 1, he was hurt. And it's like, wait a minute, you're going to go pick a guy at number 3 who's hurt and you don't know when he's going to be coming back. And so that's why it was kind of surprising to see that pick. And then we didn't get Dante Exum.
Oh, at the time too, the Sixers, I mean, granted, in hindsight looks ridiculous, but like, when a roster that needed everything, like, they had just drafted with a high pick with 6 Nerlens Noel the year before. And, Nerlens had given you flashes in 2014, even of being a guy. Like, there were a lot of people who I think wanted forward, wanted guard. Like, I'm not going to rewrite history and say I didn't want Wiggins. Like, I wanted Wiggins bad that year, like everybody else did. But, yeah, I mean, that was the first draft we ever covered on this podcast. Like, we had started the year, like, we covered the last half of the season when the Spurs won in 2013. And yeah, it was winless for Wiggins. Like, I remember talking about it before I moved to Florida. Because that was what got you by, right? Like, as a Sixers fan at the time, like, you were rooting for those, that whole 2013 season was based on you getting better players.
Yeah. Also, like, let's also forget that draft that you also traded for Dario Saric. Like, you traded. Let me rephrase that. That was the year of the Magic trade where you drafted Elfrid Payton, traded him to the Magic for Dario Saric.
You're right. That was a save draft. Yeah, that was a great draft, man. I think he smoked that draft. That was so great. And that was weird because I remember at the time too, one of them, it doesn't get talked about, but one of the more awkward all-time draft night interviews is when the Sixers took Elfrid Payton and originally the trade hadn't come out. Like, so it just looked like we were taking another point guard. And so they go right to Michael Carter-Williams, who's fresh off winning the Rookie of the Year. And they're like, how do you feel about taking this other point guard? And he's just like looking around like, are they about to trade me? Like, what is happening here? And I mean, I guess they eventually did, but yeah.
Magic legend, by the way.
I love Michael Carter-Williams, man.
Me too.
Like, listen, Rookie of the Year, I will never say a bad thing about that guy. I do think the Sixers cashed out at the right time when all was said and done. But yeah, I have Cinco de Michael. That's when he won Rookie of the Year back in the day.
Should have been Oladipo. But yeah, I remember when he came to the Magic, it was like that first playoff year because like all of the point guards were hurt, and so like they bring him in on a cheap deal, and he just starts playing defense out the wazoo, and I'm just like, yes, give me that guy. I want him to just be a Magic legend forever.
Yeah. I mean, listen, do you remember with Dante Exum, just because you mentioned him a few times now, how much of like a mystery prospect he was?
Oh yeah, there was so much uncertainty, but I'm like,
there was like
we really need a point guard. we needed a point guard. And so I'm like, yeah, give me the Australian guy, because I can't think of anybody else right now. Like, that to me, I thought was always the missing piece, was we just need a really good point guard. And then I see Aaron Gordon, and I'm just kind of like, I feel like the white people in the Dave Chappelle skit, The Racial Draft, where we're just like, the white people go up and they're like, oh, we select Colin Powell. And they're like, what? He's not even like, what is this guy?
Aaron Gordon rose really late that draft. He was a big time high riser. I mean, he went from, it was all the way up to the week before. He was like projected around like 8 or 9, and then he ended up going as high as 4. And in hindsight, it's a pretty good pick. Like, I don't think, I'm pulling it up now because I want to see, just because, I mean, I'm sure there were, Jokic is in this draft, I think.
I believe he is.
Yeah, he is. Okay, so Jokic is in this draft now. So then there you go. You have the debate, obviously, and that's at 41, like maybe the greatest pick of all time. Let's just say Jokic goes. Let's for the sake of this say Jokic goes 1, Embiid goes 2, no doubt. Mm-hmm. And then it gets kind of interesting. Like, there's a few different players you could go from here. The big standouts are like Zach LaVine, Julius Randle. But then there's, I mean, a bunch of good role players, like Aaron Gordon's in this draft, Marcus Smart is in this draft, Saric you mentioned, Yusuf Nurkic is in this draft. He's a little lower. Guys like Gary Harris, Clint Capella, Bogdanovich,
Shabazz Napier.
I know there's some names in here too that we kind of all thought were going to be good, but weren't. I was convinced Nick Stauskas was going to be a great pro, just never really turned out. Vonleh too. He always had the tools. He just never put it together at all. Like, all the athleticism was off the charts for Noah Vonleh. And he was another one where I feel like slipped. I think there were like the way Aaron Gordon rose, Vonleh, I feel like people were talking about him. Like, could he push for 3? And then just didn't end up, slipping all the way down to 9 and kind of bounced around. Didn't really have a weird career.
Cleanthony Early, Wichita State, that undefeated Wichita State team.
Dude, do you remember the big Cleanthony Early story?
The what? Which one?
The big Cleanthony story when he was a pro?
No.
Dude, he got shot outside a strip club in Queens. Like, he almost died. Like, when he played for the Knicks. Yeah, Cleanthony Early, when he played for the Knicks, got shot when he was a rookie. Like, outside a strip club in Queens, like, in the parking lot. Thank God, all is all right. But, like, dude, yeah, crazy, crazy story.
Dude, that is nuts.
Yeah, I want to pull this up. Yeah, in the early hours of December 30th, 2015, Early was held up at gunpoint and shot in the right knee while traveling in an Uber. The attack took place after Early and his girlfriend left a strip club in Queens. He was taken to the hospital and listed in stable condition.
Wait, and his girlfriend?
And his girlfriend, yeah, his girlfriend's at strip club. I know that either. Wild. She was riding for sure. Shout out to her.
All right.
So the Sixers, while we're still here, the big talk locally in Philly. And Chase, I'm sorry, I have to riff here for a little bit because I'm not expecting you to know a ton about Philadelphia geography. But
hold on, let me just sit back and just get comfortable.
Yeah, so we've talked about this a little bit. The big story with the Wells Fargo is that the Sixers rent the arena right now from the Flyers and Comcast. They want their own arena. They've debated moving it to Center City, which is just like a logistical nightmare. And so the Sixers are threatening to move across the river in Camden in New Jersey, which is honestly not a ridiculous idea at the end of things. But, like, of course, Philadelphia does not want to literally let the team go across the river. So Mayor Sherrell Parker has agreed to keep the Sixers in Philly. They're going to build this arena in Chinatown. And for like your perspective for Jacksonville's a bad example because Jacksonville, like, I don't want to hate on Jacksonville because I love Jacksonville, but like downtown Jacksonville is just leaving a lot to be desired. Let's just put it that way. So, and I can't use Orlando either because I'm like, Amway's in downtown and Amway's like right there, smack dab in the middle of everything. But like, just imagine downtown Orlando was like 6 times bigger. Everything was already built up and like Amway wasn't there. Just like imagine that was all city blocks and they just decided to just bulldoze it and put the arena there. That's essentially what the Sixers are trying to do to Chinatown. And so needless to say, that's got a lot of people upset. It's just kind of a mess. Like, I don't really like how the Sixers kind of strong arm the city here. I do think it's kicking a lot of people out of Chinatown, which is a pretty cool neighborhood in Philadelphia that, I don't think is going to benefit. Philadelphia also has the public transportation for sure. Like, it's not a driving city like the South is necessarily. Regional rail is great. SEPTA has a few spots, but like it's just not New York level of public transportation, or even DC, where it's like you can regularly take it. You're going to push a lot of people there because like you just can't drive into Center City, Philly like that. Like it's just completely impractical almost. And so I don't know. We'll see what happens here. There's still a lot of details to be released, but I guess it's good that they're not going to Camden, but I'm really interested to see how this plays out. And I mean, Chase, it just goes with the trend where it's like, I don't love when billionaire sports team owners just throw their weight around, try to bully the city and get tax money out of them and just, threaten to up and leave then. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and you've definitely kind of seen that more within like the past decade or so. I know we kind of saw that with football teams more recently, and also in baseball now with the A's that were moving to Vegas, but not Vegas right now because it's Sacramento for some reason.
Yeah.
It's definitely bizarre. I think also Orlando kind of dealt with that as well with the Amway Center because like they used to be at the TD Waterhouse Center and then it went down the road to the downtown area, which they did kind of like bulldoze and like kind of gentrify the area a little bit. And so that is kind of a big issue. I know that comes with stadiums. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying like that's what you kind of see. To kind of relate to it, like in Jacksonville, for context, we had the city just signed a stadium deal with the Jaguars because they wanted to renovate the stadium. It wasn't a whole new stadium; they just wanted to renovate it because the mayor, former mayor Lenny Curry said, "Wow, I don't know why I slurred that." Former mayor Lenny Curry said, "Right now, we both agree the bones of the stadium are good. If we just renovate it, we'll save a lot of money."
Yeah.
And so they both sides just kind of agreed upon it. And it was a nice 50-50 split. Like talks were very civil for the most part, which was kind of nice considering like what we saw with the Chargers over in San Diego going to LA, with the Rams in St. Louis going over to LA and all of these other movement things. And it is frustrating because it's just like you have the money. If you want this to be your own building, then you need to fork it over. Now, the downside is when you're building in a large city like Philly, you're not exactly finding, trees. You're going to be finding city buildings and you're going to have to demolish some so you can make room for an even bigger building. Not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's just part of infrastructure. And so I'm glad that they aren't thinking about New Jersey because if I'm New Jersey, I'm like, okay, just try to get the Nets back. Like, don't try to take another franchise like the Sixers because they're going to want to call them the New Jersey Sixers.
I mean,
and that's just depressing.
Camden is basically, though, for what, like, I know everybody gets up in arms about that because it's a different state, but like Camden is basically East Philly. Like, it is quite literally closer than most suburbs are. Like, I'm trying to think, like, imagine.
It's not like it's a Kansas City, Missouri type thing where it's like, oh, it just happens to be in two states. Like, if it's in New Jersey,
kind of is though. Like essentially, Camden is essentially that. Like that's a good example. Like Kansas City, Kansas, and Camden are a great equivalent there, where it's like Philly is, Philly and in Pennsylvania, and Kansas City, Missouri is in Missouri. Like Camden is that equivalent, where it is that close. It's just separated by a bridge. You just can't do it via land. And the practice facility is already there. Like that's the thing. And I think that's where initially the like drive was and the desire was. It would make a lot of sense. But yeah, of course I want to keep them in the city. Like I think there's just a lot of people who are invested. I mean, we saw that with the Warriors, like you talked about a little bit, but like when they left Oakland and went to San Francisco, like it's still the same team. It's the same metro area, but it is like that has an impact. It's definitely, it definitely has an effect on the culture and the morale of the area. Like people want to keep the Sixers and Phillies, but you don't want to get strong armed to do it either. And that's kind of the point.
My thing is, would the city be able to rally behind the Sixers team if it was in New Jersey? Like I'm trying to think about the Sixers fan base because again, I'm not a Philly expert, believe it or not, not a Philly expert on this show. But even though I've not purposely, I have been like a homer for you in a way because I'll make the homer points just so you don't come off as one. This city would still be able to rally even if they're in New Jersey? Like that's the thing.
I don't think people look at it as New Jersey and Camden. Like I don't think it would be different it'd be more of the like for example with the Rams when they moved from St. Louis to, or if we want to use an NBA example, when the Thunder moved from Seattle and they become Oklahoma City, like yeah, they're all your guys from last year, but yeah, our whole identity has changed. Like it's hard for me to just rally around that, and I feel kind of betrayed. I wouldn't really have that big of a betrayal if the Sixers go across the river in Camden. Like you didn't up and move them to like, you didn't go and put them in Newark. You didn't go put them in Jersey City. You didn't go bury them down in Maryland somewhere where that's just suddenly inaccessible to the metro area. Like it's just, people again see New Jersey on the, it wouldn't be any different than the Giants and the Jets playing in New Jersey and still having New York on the name. It would just probably open us up to jokes, but like we're not getting them anyway from losing the second round every year. Like, come on.
Yeah.
If that list didn't tell you earlier, we've been through a lot. Like, I can rattle off a whole lot of things that are going to hurt me worse than someone telling me that the Sixers are in New Jersey.
It's a
But
yearly tradition where I text you, it gets better. It gets better.
Yeah, sure it does. But I actually am excited. Like normally, the past 2 years I've been completely apathetic going into the season. I am excited. I do think this roster is good. I like the moves that they made. Taking a look at the Eastern Conference, because now, I mean, like, again, we know with Boston, they're going to be really, really competitive. To coming off the title defense, bringing everybody back, they're going to be the team to beat. But, when you look at how the playoffs ended last year, the top 8, you got Boston, New York, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Orlando, Indy, Philly, Miami. I don't really see any of those 8 teams getting bounced out. And then that last little mix is like maybe, Chicago and Atlanta get in, but whatever. Like, I think we all know that none of them are really contending at this point. And anybody below them, I don't think is going to make the jump. Detroit's not there. Washington's not there. Charlotte's not there. Toronto's not there. Brooklyn is only going to be worse. Like, it's not really. So I guess I don't anticipate a big shakeup in the East like that with the top 8. The question is now, it's like, where do you tier everybody? Because I think any of these 8 teams, you could look at me and talk me into them winning the East to varying degrees. But I mean, Justin and I did episode a few weeks ago where like we were talking about Indy because we feel like we talked about Indy the least, and it's like they were in the conference finals last year and they're running it back basically. So
yeah, but the Hawks were also in the conference final like a few years ago, and look at them.
Yeah, for what it's worth, and I don't want to keep sounding. I'm going to sound like a homer, but I've said this before on the podcast, so I'll continue to own it. Like that to me is about the Sixers blowing it more than it is about the Hawks. Where Indy, I feel like earned it. I know the Knicks got banged up a little bit, but Indy. I guess Indy's injuries didn't really come until Boston, but they had some stuff to deal with in their own right.
But yeah, but Indy also got there because like the Knicks were also dealing with injuries, and the Knicks took them to 7. So that's why I'm more or less on the line of like, yeah, Indy's good, but like there's a lot of buts in that situation. That team was a really bad defensive team. Like they were good offensively, but like the problem was they were really bad defensively and they struggled a lot, especially in games that they should have won. Like they should have handled that series against the Knicks, but if it wasn't for the injury bug, the Knicks are probably taking that series and also like won't get swept by the Celtics. Like, yeah, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, but did they? Like,
No, they did. They did. They blew it against Boston for sure, but like those games were competitive. They didn't go out. They went out sad and not sad at the same time, if that makes sense. Like, because they competed, but like, man, yeah, I'm sick of them, Indy. I feel like I should I'm if I'm a Pacers fan, I feel like I should have won 2 of those conference finals games at the bare minimum. And I don't think they were beating Boston, but they just straight up fumbled the bag in 2 of them.
They absolutely fumbled the bag. I need to pull these up again because it was just like that was because yeah, they were close, but at the same time, it's like this is your issue is that like you literally had a lead with 10 seconds left and you still with the ball, mind you, and you still lost. Like this team just kind of found ways to lose, but somehow, by the way, I think they put up more of an effort against Boston than Dallas did in the playoffs. But like it's still just the fact that like I don't know. And it's not I'm not hating on Tyrese Halliburton, even though he did make fun of Magic fans. Like it's which for context, he went on NXT and which is based in Orlando. They go whatever at Full Sail and they were booing him. He's like, yeah, I'd boo too if I was an Orlando Magic fan. It's like, bro,
All right,
Like,
I respect that. It's a little
I
random, but at least you're in Orlando. I get it.
I can respect it from like the wrestling heel, but it's like it's almost like when Timberwolves fans try to like make fun of the match. It's like you're in no world to talk right now. It's like you just won your first playoff series since 2013. Like, and that's about it. Like you beat the Bucks that were riddled with injuries. You beat the Knicks that were also riddled with injuries. So I'm not going to sit here and start tooting my horn and start saying, "Whoa, at least I'm not a Magic fan." It's like the Magic are probably going to make it to the finals before you. Like I will.
I thought for a second you were going to say next year. I was like, wow, we're really jumping to the tears early.
I've said 2 years the Magic are going to make it to the finals.
Okay, all right, I can respect that a little more. I'm not there next year, but like if everything goes right, there's a window.
Yeah.
Are you with me in the sense that like, and I mean it's not really that controversial, but like Boston's still the clear one here, right?
Yes, Boston. I have right now I have 3 teams that I can see making it out of the Eastern Conference. Obviously, it's the Celtics. I'll say it for you. I see the Sixers because Tyrese Maxey looks really good. If Joel Embiid can stay just remotely healthy, I'm even a fan of just like not having Embiid play for the entire regular season, and just like he'll be fresh for the playoffs. And I think the Paul George
scraping and clawing for an 8 seed.
No, I think you would. I mean, you didn't have him for the majority of the regular season, and you were still a what?
An 8.
Oh yeah, you were a 7 seed. So at least like have him play a few more games. You got Paul George now. Like you can easily be a 6 seed now that you have Paul George, because that was probably the best off season. Like you re-signed Embiid, you signed Paul George, and you got rid of Tobias Harris. And so I feel like that's just a win all around.
It's pretty great off season. The only other one that, at least in the East, that I feel like has good of an offseason as we did, or arguably better, is the Knicks. And that's the question is, it's like, well, who do you think is number 2 then? Do you think it's Philly or do you think it's the Knicks?
I have Philly and I have the Knicks. Like those are my top 3 teams that I can see coming out of the East. I don't see the Bucks getting out because I feel like Doc Rivers is going to Doc Rivers that team up.
Yeah.
I don't see the Cavs doing it just because I feel like they're good, but not great. Like there's stuff there, but at the same time, like what that Magic playoff series showed me is it's Donovan Mitchell, because like it's all Donovan Mitchell, and you got to pray to God that Darius Garland or somebody shows up, and that's what happened to them in Game 7.
By the way, speaking of the Cavs, how about Isaac Okoro, 3 years, $38 million. Congrats, buddy. You are the last Woj bomb in recorded history, which is kind of fitting, honestly. Like, I think like a role player, and like Isaac Okoro is a nice player, but like I feel like a role guy, rotation guy being the last, like that's a good for the love of the game Woj tweet to go out on. Like he's not being all Hollywood and breaking some like Paul George or Mikal Bridges trade or something.
That's like Christopher Nolan retiring after the movie Tenet. He's like, all right, cool, I'm done. Peace. Yeah. And then he just walks out.
It's like, all right, okay, I guess that's it. We'll wrap it up here. That is, I like Okoro coming back, by the way. I still think he's a good defender for that team. But you're right. Yeah. I mean, I'm higher on Orlando's upside. Cleveland is still firmly in the prove it to me. Like every time I'm ready to turn the corner on Cleveland, they just don't. Like I need Mobley and Garland to take a step, and maybe they move on from Garland. Like that is the big question now that they've got Donovan Mitchell locked up, which is huge for them. Like that's obviously been a huge, everyone said he's going to New York. Now I don't think they have the assets to do it, but that was the rumor for the longest time. Now you can knock that out, which is super helpful for morale. Again, it's just about Mobley there. I need Mobley to take the next step. I need Garland to take the next step if I'm going to take them seriously and compete. The Knicks are probably a little deeper than the Sixers, so I'll just give them the benefit. And I mean, look, they beat us last year. Like I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt off that. I'm with you on Milwaukee though. It's not even just Doc as much as I want to punch down on Doc right now. Like just everything about that team seemed off last year, and maybe it resets, but like Dame feels like he got old fast. Like I just thought him and Giannis, like him and Giannis pick and roll was going to be a basketball nirvana. And it just wasn't. Like, it feels like neither of them got comfortable. Like, the only time it felt like Dame was comfortable is when Giannis was hurt and he was running the offense by himself.
Well, that's the problem when you bring in another superstar is that one of you has to change your game. And I think that's what kind of made the Miami Heat very special was that all three of them kind of when I say all three, I mean LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh all seem to just kind of adapt later on in the years. And so it could possibly change, but like there was way too many changes in that offseason between getting rid of a bunch of your role player guys, like losing Drew Holiday so you can get Damian Lillard. You lose a lot on defense, but you gain Damian Lillard. And so you thought you were going to get Dame time, but in actuality, you just kind of didn't. And you had that. You fired your coach, you brought in Doc Rivers, and the team is a 500 team after that point. You struggle in the postseason. Yes, you have injuries, so you kind of like give Doc that excuse, but in actuality, like you should know what you're getting now with Doc Rivers.
Yeah.
Like this isn't like you're getting a first time coach. Like it's not like you're getting like Ime Udoka. Like you got a first time coach and you decided to get rid of him for somebody who has been notorious for blowing leads and not producing in the postseason except for one time. And they've milked the hell out of that one time. And so I'm not big on the Bucks, which is a shame because I like Giannis, I like Dame, but you got rid of so much. They're kind of like the Eastern Conference Phoenix Suns in a way, because when the Phoenix Suns got Kevin Durant, they gave up all their depth, and they just say when they traded for Bradley Beal, all even more of their depth, and what was left of their depth gone. And so now it's like you have three players, and then you have 6 feet of crap, and then there's everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I could talk for 30 minutes.
No, but you're kind of right. I mean, Milwaukee too, what it just comes down to is like everybody's getting old fast. Like Brook Lopez is getting older, Bobby Portis is getting older, Chris Middleton is getting older and has now dealt with injuries. Like, and of course, I mean, there's always that hindsight now too. It was just like, yeah, do you make the Drew Holiday trade if you know he's going to go to Boston? Like, does that work out when you necessarily like? And again, hindsight is 2020. The way Dame didn't work out, and maybe it just like maybe they do take that first offseason to adjust. It was chaotic last year. Like I think goes without saying that hiring Doc I thought was a clown move. Like the book had been written about Doc by the time he got to Philly. And then I don't know how you watch the Philly tenure and then still somehow think the book is not written. But again, we don't need to beat that drum for the 1,000th time.
I want to say what's funny about the Doc move, and this is kind of like a little bit offset, and I'll let you finish. When ESPN let go of Jeff Van Gundy because of the fact that like, hey, he might want a head coaching job.
Right. And then the Doc leaves immediately.
And so not only Doc leaves immediately,
JJ, you're right.
JJ Redick leaves later.
JJ leaving was crazy. Like Doc, you should have maybe seen. JJ leaving was great. But Doc also, I think you think who's going to hire this guy again? And that's what was crazy about Milwaukee. And it's like, look, the whole reason they brought him in was get a little better defensively, but it's just like, cool. They got a tiny bit better defensively and their offense cratered. Like, I don't know. Maybe they turn around. Maybe, after an off season together, you work out, you gel, you fix that chemistry a little bit. Like you still have Giannis. I don't want to downplay that, but I do. I have zero faith in this Bucks squad the way I do in the Sixers and the Knicks. And even like I might have more in the Magic than I do in the Bucks. And I'm not just like trying to say that to appease you on the other side. Like, I don't know if Suggs continues to take the leap. If Franz could be that consistent 2-scorer, like Paulo, I think is already a superstar in the making. Like it just feels like they're prime now with a year of playoff experience under the belt, like getting a real good, tough 7-gamer in with Cleveland last year. I don't know. I feel like they're ready to rock.
I think so too. I think what you're going to see is like this revenge arc with Franz and with Jalen and with Paolo, because you saw like, first off, the high of the emotion of game 6, which was an all-timer.
Right.
I will sit and I will watch it. Just like whenever there's highlights of Jason Williams on my Twitter feed, I will stop and I will watch that. Whenever there's highlights of Mike Allstott, I will stop and I'll watch that. If there is game 6 footage, I will stop and watch it because it was incredible. I think you're going to see that revenge arc because they realized they kind of pooped the bed towards the end. You had an 18-point lead and you choked that away. And I think when you saw that with Jalen earlier in the season, when he started crying after the Lakers game, when he just gave it his all, and then you just see him just like start tearing it up. It was kind of like that awakening. I think you might see that with all of them. And now you add in Kentavious Caldwell Pope. And so like you have an even more disgusting defense, which by the way,
Yeah.
you can't fake defense in this league. Like there's a lot, like you can look at offensive stats and go, okay, that's a bit like you can fake some of these. It's like, it's actually, you know, there's some asterisks here. You can't really do that with defense. And so I think this Magic team actually, like if you were to say, hey, who's making it to the Eastern Conference? Is it going to be the Magic or is it going to be the Bucks? I'm going to say the Magic. I think the Magic are going to be an Eastern Conference final team this year. Like they look solid. I think defensively they're going to still be the same. And as long as they stay true to their identity, which they haven't changed any, really, they only added one player and they only lost Markelle Fultz and Joe Ingles.
Yeah.
Yeah, the identity is still there.
Yeah.
So now that's more time for Corey Joseph, more time for Anthony Black.
Yeah. Anthony Black is a guy who I still think can potentially break out. So that'll be good.
Jed Howard as well.
They'll miss Joe Ingles from a locker room perspective. I think he did a lot good for them last year, and even just shooting the basketball. I mean, they needed shooting last year, but that's why you go out and you get KCP, right? And like KCP is just a winner. Like if nothing else, he's a proven winner at this point. He did it in Denver, he did it in the Lakers. Like he just provides value come playoff time. He knows his role. He doesn't try to play outside it. He's not afraid of the moment. And you're right. I think it's going to be big for that locker room. You know, having a guy like that to kind of steady the ship when moments get tough. Like I'm really looking forward to seeing him in that leadership role. Like if the Sixers hadn't landed Paul George, he was a big target that I wanted. Like I think any NBA team that is serious should want to employ Kentavious Caldwell Pope. Like one of my, Denver last year had a challenge of like trying to replace some of the rotation guys with younger guys. And we've talked about that a little bit in the last few weeks with Jamal Murray extension, but it's like, they're going to have a hell of a time replacing KCP this year. Like this is the first like real challenge I think Denver is going to have in that regard.
Yeah. The KCP signing isn't sexy, but it's a signing that like, if you listen to a lot of basketball heads, they go, oh, this is actually really good. Like he's a great role player. It's like, drafting an O lineman in football isn't sexy, but like when you see them start protecting your quarterback for a lot longer, you go, "Oh yeah, like
it's
this
going out
makes
and
sense."
It's what it reminds me of. It's the Celtics getting Derek White. It's somebody like that. Where
Yes,
it's like, that may not be the first guy you know about nationally, but if you know ball, you kind of know. Like that was an insane pickup, and where you're just like, how did that even happen for as little as it was? Obviously KCP a little bit different in free agency. They exactly fleece somebody out here, but I also like the Magic though being aggressive and like trying to bring in a guy like that and saying, hey, we're serious about winning now. Like they spent the last decade not really being relevant and competitive. Like build around this core. I think we can talk about Paulo for a whole other podcast, but like we know what it is. These guys are ready to take the leap. I still think they're in that Cleveland, Indy, maybe a little ahead of Miami tier. Miami just got to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing is I just worry about Jimmy's health at this point.
Miami is like, it's hard to judge Miami because like on paper, the team isn't good in a way. Like they're not, let me rephrase that. They're not stellar.
Yeah.
But they have the best coach in the league in Eric Spoelstra.
Yep.
He could take a G League team and just make them at least a play-in team. Like at the very least, like because he's technically done that before.
Yeah.
That team has developed so many like second round undrafted prospects and just made them talent. Like Jaime Jaquez, second round pick, and he's one of their best scorers. And now you're seeing him in commercials with Jimmy Butler. They did, I believe Caleb Martin was a second rounder. He might have been undrafted. And I think the same was for Max Strus. But either way, like these weren't actually like first round commodities. Like these were just like lesser known players and they made them stars. And now they got money as well. So that's what's hard for me to judge with Miami. Like say, I want to look at this roster and like, yeah, it's a crap roster, but they're also, I wouldn't be surprised if they sneak in a fourth round or a fourth overall seed.
Yeah, Max Strus was undrafted. Caleb Martin was undrafted. I think Jaquez was a first, actually. I think they took him. Yeah, they took him at 18.
I thought he was a second rounder.
Jaquez was one of those guys who, he slipped down the board, and it was like, hey, yeah, he was really good right off the rip. Like, he was one of the more instant impacts in the NBA. I mean, you nailed it with Spo. Like, I'm just always going to give Spo the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to give Bam the benefit of the doubt too at this point, along with Jimmy. Like, I worry about their third option. Like, I think Hero's a little overrated. I don't doubt that they'll find some guy to do some Miami Heat culture voodoo nonsense, but it is a little, as Jimmy ages, it does seem like the degree of difficulty is a lot higher for Miami than it has been in the past. And so, that's just one of those things. We're going to have to see if they can do it again, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt until I just, kind of see them not do it anymore.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Appreciate you guys as always. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. I'll read them on the podcast. Get the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. And of course, you can watch the show on YouTube. Big thanks to my guy Chase Bunker here for filling in. You've heard him again here a few times. WOKV, Bunker's Burning Hot Take. Chase, you got anything else you want to plug or you want to talk about before we get out of here?
You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/thatgameshow if you want to hear about any video games. Bunker's Burning Hot Take if you want to hear sports. I'll get back to that eventually. Hopefully, Orlando Magic, if you're listening, re-sign Jalen Suggs. We need to get that deal done before the season starts. Kyle Lowry got a fat ass and he's a dirty player.
You can stop at the first. I should have just cut it after the first part.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I feel
somebody said with the Sixers with Lowry and Yabusele now have the thickest roster in the league.
That is a thick roster. Oh man, but yeah, I think that's about it for me.
That's a good way to end it.
I thought about ending and saying more references to the '90s PC game Titanic Adventure Out of Time.
Yeah,
but it's like, can't do it.
We might be too far in the weeds with that one.
Yes.